How does Gyrozeppeli's spin work in Steel Ball Run? The idea, without any specific spoilers about what happens in the story, is that spin is a type of psychic power anyone can learn to use that lets them add a little amount of rotational force to things. You know how you can wind up a sling by swinging it in your hand or keep momentum building in a fidget spinner? Because it's easier to build force in an object when it's only moving in place, since it won't go anywhere while you charge it up and it stays where you can keep reaching and hitting it? That's the idea behind the spin. Rotation makes it easier to build an extra amount of momentum in something, because the object is moving in place. It's so much easier that if humanity has been slightly psychic this whole time, then even if the average person could never make objects float with their mind directly, they could at least give an object extra force by having it rotate in place, which you could then use to add to that object's power when throwing it. By building up angular momentum, which can last for a couple of seconds after you've stopped spinning an object, you can throw that object before the rotational charge runs out. And there are various ways spinning power can be used to make projectiles more effective. You can make objects fly farther in a straight line and resist changes to air. You can mess with their trajectories. You can add more force to something for more of an impact. You can keep building up more and more power in a projectile before releasing it. And you can give a stationary object resistance to forces trying to impact its movement from outside, letting it rotate or balance freely to then be able to go on the offensive and attack those forces back, like a gyroscope. The steel balls are an intricately crafted throwing object, meant to be as efficient as possible to generate spin energy with, and meant to make the most of the power the spin grants, by applying that force into more precise and specialized effects. So instead of only providing the user brute physical force and farther throwing power, the momentum from the spin can chain react into targets in more intricate ways to mess with the movements and positions of pieces of their bodies, making the user's actions more versatile and effective. You don't need a steel ball to spin, and you could develop other tools that specialize in other types of actions, as long as they're designed with an understanding of how the spin works, what a user needs to produce it, and how the structure of this tool will take that force and channel it into a specific type of effect. So in general, the spin is about building rotational power in one place, to then chain react into others, and seeing the objects around you as pieces in different positions of an interconnected world that you can apply force to specific pieces of in order to cause some overall effect in your favor. The most effective way to use the spin would be to find a piece of that interconnected world, a medium, to charge with the spin as your starting piece. You can then conduct the added leeway, freedom, and power from the rotational force you build through. By giving something you throw extra power, it's possible to break records and pass hurdles you couldn't otherwise. And by using it to chain react your slight amount of psychic power into the rest of the connected world around you, to have everything else move into place in a way that benefits you, it's like slanting the ground beneath you in your favor, so you have more of an advantage over everything else, which can ultimately let you overwhelm opponents and use their own movements against them, since the way their movements are connected to your movements can be skewed through the conduit. It's about optimization by organizing your power. You maximize and concentrate your force through a conduit to then overpower the wider motions of a target that are connected to yours, which then lets you move the target in your favor. Because the interconnected nature of the universe is what lets you find roundabout ways to move things, sometimes a miracle can occur and somebody's paralyzed legs can move. Growth is about accepting that personal strengths are defined and maintained by the external world around you, because you're part of and mutually defined by it, and finding ways to lock in holistic opportunities and sources of power until they're ingrained in your foundation and things you can naturally approach solving problems through. You can learn to use the spin in a 4-step method. First, you get something you can easily hold and move around with your hand, which you then visualize applying rotational power to until it starts spinning and floating on its own in your hand. While you can't make an object float on its own directly, the rotation gives it enough power to then float, which helps keep it distanced from other things so it can spin more freely, which is why the effect is that it starts spinning and floating at the same time. They feed back into each other, so you can't make it float without the spinning, and you can't make it move from place to place. Second, you learn to conduct effects through it. You build the force to then throw the object and reach a target further away, or to curve its trajectory, or to provoke a target to react in response to the throw. This is where you're learning that you're meant to ripple the force from the spin through the elements of the world around you to chain react into some overall effect that benefits you. You're treating your projectile as a conduit and learning to control its movement through the spin you've charged it with. Third, once you've got the hang of applying intricate effects and added power through your projectile, you can learn to leave enough rotational force after the collision to make it return back to you. Once you do this, you can retrieve your projectile and keep a steady balance with the amount of spin you apply through it, where it can always return to you after you use it, letting you rapidly and repeatedly use the spin through a single projectile as you slowly break down obstacles, refine your precision on a target, figure out the right amount of strength to use, and get a better sense of the bigger picture in the environment around you that you can take advantage of through the slightest applications of force in the right positions to set off an effect in your favor that wraps a conflict up. At this point, you're effective with the spin, as long as nobody's attacking you back, because you're sort of standing still and leaving your actual body vulnerable every time you throw your projectile. So fourth, to really master the spin, what you want to do is figure out ways to complement your own movements and actions by throwing it. This way, you're not vulnerable and on your own when it's in flight. So if you're running and parkouring, you can throw your projectile to kick up and add force to a piece of rock you can then use as a platform to jump off of while it's in the air, to reach somewhere higher up. Or, if you're throwing a steel ball at an enemy while falling off a cliff, you can have the ball bend your arm backward when it flies back to you to lock your limb onto a branch before you travel too far off the cliff. Keeping this rhythm to be in sync with your projectiles and use your own body while you're throwing something like a steel ball really lets you make the most of them, which is why Gyro carries himself in fights the way he does. And that's as much as I can say without getting a bit more spoilery. Because for one, rotation is defined by interconnectedness. Even elementary particles that aren't made of smaller pieces, so they can't move in place, still have a property when interacting with the world around them that has an orientation as if they were spinning, which is as intrinsic to them as mass. If you believe in gravity as a fundamental part of reality, you should also believe in spin. And that means there's an endless amount of power you can harness if you define your movements through the interconnected world around you. People don't just use stands to reflect their sources of strength in Steel Ball Run, they also use horse companions they rely on to move. Anyone who refuses that companionship when forced into a rat race in order to solve problems for themselves, or anyone who only sees others as pawns to exploit, misses out on potentially limitless power channeled through that living foundation of their additional agency and bridge to the rest of the world. And second, this is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Phantom Blood continuity or not, everything will circle back to stands. And the reason people can use the spin, in particular, as a supernatural power is related to what allows stands to exist. Hamon is lightning channeled by breathing that recovers injuries, boosts your power, and travels through other living creatures. Humans can use it because everyone has a little influence on the world as long as they live, and that's thanks to the sun constantly providing energy and heat to the planet that plants can use to grow, which humans can then absorb from food through the rest of the food chain. So Hamon is based on the food chain, but its primary effect is that it replicates the properties of the sun because the energy everyone relies on to live fundamentally comes from this big ball of concentrated heat in the solar system. Maybe humans can simply use the spin because anyone can have a little more influence on the world if they optimize how they solve problems. But there are two total sources of heat that power all life on Earth by working in harmony with each other. There's the sun that provides the planet with warmth and energy through its rays, but there's also a ball of heat made from some unknown solid material at the very center of the Earth's core. This solid substance constantly releases heat, melting and moving the magma surrounding it, and thanks to the Earth's constant rotation, the currents of this magma flow in spirals that all point in the same direction, constantly generating a magnetic field around the Earth in that orientation, like the magnetic fields generated by the figurative spins of charged particles that are the building blocks for everything in the universe. And this magnetic field deflects harmful particles from the sun that would destroy the atmosphere and make it impossible for life to exist. Maybe it's only possible for humans to use the spin because of something deep within the Earth's core. So you gotta wonder, what is at the very center of the Earth in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure?